I mean, it'd be great to have somebody who was defending speaking freely. And this man, Arif Ahmed, he famously, of course, invited Helen Joyce, a feminist and part of Sex Matters and an author of Trans, Where Ideology Meets Reality, a fantastic book and a regular guest on this show. He invited her to much consternation and upset and pearl clutching by academics and students alike at Cambridge University for people to hear their views. Do you think that this is the answer to all our woke woes?
It's certainly not the answer to all our woes. If the government appoints somebody good to the role, and Arif Ahmed would, I'm sure, be excellent in it, then it may be capable of being one part of the pushback against the increasingly censorious and repressive culture across our public institutions, actually, not just in our universities. Yeah. So it's a step. It's certainly not the whole answer.
No, indeed. I mean, we have got ridiculous stories again this weekend and today about trigger warnings for students. Even just about stuff, plot lines in Shakespeare or archaeology students being given a trigger warning that they may have to actually look at bones of dead people. I mean, if this was in a Hollywood film, we'd think this was a bit too silly and frankly, what a nonsense film. And yet it's happening in real life. Why are people not speaking up about it? Because certainly when I was at university, obviously quite a long time ago, the idea that you'd need a trigger warning for something like this, I mean, people would have, it's not only it wouldn't have happened, people would have laughed at you and told you to shut up, and probably in stronger terms than that. When did that switch happen, that we took this insanity seriously?
Well, and that's a terribly good question. Somehow, over the last, well, certainly over the period of the current Conservative government, it has to be said, this culture has taken an extraordinarily firm grip on all our institutions, on our schools, on our universities, on our police forces, on the Crown Prosecution Service, on the Ministry of Justice. I mean, across the board, all our most important institutions seem to be, to a large extent, in the grip of this madness. And the question why is one to which we very urgently need an answer, which is why Sex Matters is calling for public inquiry into just that question. Yeah. How has this happened? How have Stonewall and their allies acquired so much power to tell people what they're allowed to think, what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to teach? It's an astonishing state of affairs we've got to, and we need to understand how we've arrived at it and how to make sure it doesn't happen again for some mad new religion.
And I do think one woke czar isn't going to be able to come up against all of that. I mean, it's imbued in our private firms as well. One other particular issue, and I know it's what Sex Matters has focused on, of course, is the issue of gender self-ID and where trans rights clash with women's and girls' rights and safety. We saw before Christmas that vote in the Scottish Parliament led by the SNP's Nicola Sturgeon for gender self-ID. So if in Scotland you can basically, after a few weeks with no medication, no medical referral or treatment whatsoever, and from the age of 16, you can basically say, I think I'm born in the wrong body. My gender is now opposite from the one I was born from, and that would be the law. Question mark over the impact of that on the UK, the wider UK, because that's not the law in England and Wales and Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak, we understand, is talking about vetoing that. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, was asked about what he would do yesterday. He, of course, did a classic sitting on the fence, saying he'd wait to see what the government was going to do. I love that he doesn't know what he thinks until he finds out what someone else thinks, which is very weird for someone who wants to be Prime Minister. But there is a genuine concern about this, that somebody can, let's face it, the concern is among women, about men saying, I'm a woman, and then having access to women's safe spaces, women's prisons, refuges, changing rooms, toilets. There's no doubt at all this needs to be vetoed by the Prime Minister, but are you confident he will do that?
I wouldn't say confident. The signs seem to be hopeful that that there may be some use of either Section 35 or Section 33. Certainly that needs to be done. The consequences for the whole of the UK are very substantial. Basically, the Scottish government is proposing grotesquely irresponsible legislation that will throw the whole gender recognition regime throughout the UK into chaos. and certainly create enormously more doubt about who can and who cannot be entitled to use women-only spaces. And there is a subtlety there. A gender recognition certificate is not an access all areas pass that simply allows the holder to access all women's spaces. There are still exceptions that individual service providers and businesses can use, but it makes the legal arguments and the legal route to using those exceptions more complicated and more frightening.
Yeah.
And these are exceptions that need to be able to be operated by anyone. They need to be clearly understood, clearly operable.
But, yes, exactly. And then enforced with that bizarre situation that you could be recognised as a woman, you know, on the north of the border. You cross over, literally a yard later, you would be a man under the UK law, currently law operating in England. But again, I think for most people, this stuff is really basic and really straightforward. I do not understand any politician who doesn't get it. And I don't think any politician and any political party should be elected who doesn't get this really basic stuff. Good to hear that the Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, is planning to tell sports bodies that trans athletes shouldn't be in women's sport, and women's sport is for women who are women, born female. Really straightforward, this stuff. It doesn't need anything more complicated than that, does it?
It's not hard. And the law, in relation to sport, the law is really not hard. There is the most straightforward exception you could ask for that basically says if the sport is the kind of sport in which your sex makes a difference, then you're allowed to be men. And men, for these purposes, includes all men.
Yeah.
So men, including men who think they're women.